Honestly, you knew it was going to happen. If you had to know it was happening. So Shogun, that is the review for today. Very obviously, I love the show. Got to bust out all my samurai stuff. I just left up the Ghost of Tsushima thing. I busted this out. Horrible pose. I know if you're not in the figures, it probably doesn't matter. But if you are, I know. It's just, I couldn't take the time to pose it. I actually have to take off like the little guard straps that he has on his hand. They're not attached to the hand. You can't just take them off and put a new hand on. You have to pull a tiny little elastic band over his individual fingers to take this junk off. So I was like, I'm not doing that. So here's Jin Sakai. That's the pose. But Ghost of Tsushima, one of my favorite games of all time because it lets you dive into an amazing samurai story. And then Shogun was announced, obviously years later, and it was like, okay, I think I'm gonna love this show. It looked amazing. I love FX. FX is honestly one of my favorite channels. I mean, they have so many great shows that are just absolutely well done. Like some of my favorite shows that have ever been created. Like Justified, without a doubt, one of the best shows ever made. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is literally the longest running live action comedy show that there is on the planet. Probably, I don't know. You know, they say that, but I don't know if it's on the whole planet. But they say it's the longest running one ever. So that's great. Every season is hilarious. So I highly recommend watching that show. Of course, they've had Archer, which I know how that, you know, it fell off, but you know, Archer was Archer. I never watched Nip Tuck, but Nip Tuck was huge. The Shield started on FX. That was another crazy show they had. Whatever the fire station show was that I also never watched, but they always have like crazy famous shows. And then once they're gone, they're like kind of gone, but they put out the best stuff ever. I always love FX for that. And then Shogun comes along and I was like, okay, the trailer looked absolutely amazing. I was like, okay, I think this might be it. This might do the trick. And then I watched the first episode and I'm like, hold on a second. You see it from the trailer. She's like, oh yeah, it's in the trailer, this and that. The show is in Japanese. There is a dub, by the way, if you haven't actually watched the show or if it just takes you a long time to get through it watching subtitles. Apparently there is a dub version on Hulu. I guess if you go, you know, you pick episode by episode or whatever, I guess that's how you choose it. When I did it, it went through like the natural version of the show. So there is a dub. I might actually watch it dub just to see who does their own voices, because obviously, you know, a lot of the actors that are speaking Japanese can speak English. I've seen them in other things, but I don't think everyone can. It's not 100%. I'm not 100% sure about that. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, as far as the dub goes, how that actually plays out. But there is a dub if you have not gotten to the show yet. But absolutely amazing series. I'll do like a slight spoiler-free segment since we're going through the whole season. Obviously there will be spoilers, but I'll let you know when we get to those, which will probably be like in less than a minute if I'm being totally honest, because the show's amazing. Obviously I'm super biased. I mean, my name's Invisiblekatana because I love katanas. I love, you know, Japanese culture and stuff like that and samurai and all those things. And this was a great story. So I was already invested in it because the trailer looked amazing. And then you get into the show, it's like, oh, they're actually like speaking Japanese most of the time at the very least. And it's just like, wow, this story is actually really cool. And of course it's based off a book, and there was an old mini series back in the day, and it was just like, wow, I hadn't heard of Shogun until this was actually announced. So I didn't know about the old show or you know, the original book. But I was like, okay, hey, I'm gonna watch this 100%. I was like, I would definitely check this out and see what ends up happening. And I absolutely loved it all the way through. Like, there's some good action, the acting is phenomenal, the drama is great, the set pieces, like the money they spent went into making characters and like locations look legit. I was like, wow, this looks really, really good. Like, you watch like documentary stuff and it's like, oh yeah, that's what it looks like, and they recreated and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, they put in the work. They also filmed in Canada. They are not in Japan. I thought for sure that they actually filmed in Japan, because I was like, a lot of this stuff, I was like, okay, you know, I wonder how many of these, I just assumed, I was like, I wonder how much of this stuff they actually built and what was like, you know, maybe some places that they actually found that were actually like shooting locations. I was like, oh, they filmed in Canada. So I imagine they built everything because they don't really have those Japanese structures just sitting around in Canada. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize that, but they definitely did phenomenal work in the costumes and set design and all that stuff. The CG work that they do, you know, which is obviously a ton considering it's in Canada, is clearly phenomenal. But acting great across the board. The action is really good that they have in there. The emotional bits are definitely the best parts, like just the shock moments and just who's gonna do what, who's gonna be truthful, who's gonna betray someone, who's just gonna do what they do because that's their personality. It's like, for better or for worse, this is how that person acts. So there are so many different elements to it that are absolutely amazing. And it all comes together within, I think, only like 8 or 9 episodes. And it's fantastic. Absolutely love the show, 100%. If they do a release, this is one of those shows, like when I finished, I was like, yep, this is like one of the few things I'll actually buy physical. If they release it, I'll get like a Blu-ray, or, you know, if they do like a 4K version or whatever. I'm gonna pick this one up for sure, just to have it permanently. I love this show that much. So that's non-spoiler wise. Definitely check it out if you haven't. Everyone's obviously been raving about it, so they've already told you, you should watch it. You should watch it. It's great. Getting into spoilers. Now, I'm horrible at names, so I honestly only remember like 4 characters, and it's really like our big 3 characters. So, of course, we have Blackthorn, who's represented because I don't have like flintlock replicas, but I got these Civil War revolver replicas. These do still pack, well, I mean, they're fake, obviously, but the actual version of those, you still do the packing powder, so it's fairly close. So I don't have flintlocks, but I got those. So we have Blackwood. We of course have Toranaga, who is like the liege who wants, eventually goes on to become Shogun at some point. And then of course we have really who I would say is like she's definitely the heart of the show, but it could easily be argued that she's really the main character, even though they have to focus on Blackthorn because it's definitely his perspective quite a bit, through the series, where it's like, hey, I'm the dude who's just like, not only do I not speak the language, but also the other people that do speak the language I speak are like my mortal and my country's full-on enemies are the only people that speak my language. And it's like, it's interesting to have his perspective on that and seeing him at times where it's like people either trying to lie on him or him just trying to figure his way through things. So I was like, of course it makes sense that they have his perspective, but they jump around quite a bit, which apparently in the original Shogun series, they didn't do that. It was all specifically from Blackthorn's perspective. So I'm at some point, I say like, oh, I'd love to see what that was like. I might watch it. You know how it is. You go back to watch something that's old and it's like, maybe I'll like it, maybe I won't. I might check it out, but I like them jumping through perspectives. And then with Mariko, she's of course, like I said, you can't deny that she's like the heart of, like they literally focus on the fact by the end of the series, like she's clearly the heart of the show. Amongst all the characters that can fight and argue, live or die, it's her. She's the one that in the end kind of changed the tide ultimately. And of course there's some factors leading up to that and how things, kind of played out and just the way it went, where some things were planned, some things were not so planned. And it was just like, man, this, like, how is this going to play out? So I enjoyed it all the way through, but those are our 3 big characters. And then we have, of course, Toranaga having to deal with stuff with the council and being like, all right, well, I'm trying to protect, he starts off as 100%, most of the series, admittedly, until we get to them where it's like, what's your real deal? Like, what are you actually looking for? He starts off as the guy where it's like, hey, I don't want all these accolades. Of course I don't want war. I want to keep the heirs, I want to keep the heir alive. Like our leader is gone and we're supposed to be working together, but now everybody wants to kind of do their own thing. I'm not really trying to do that. I'm trying to protect the kid. Like that's what I do. And then of course, all these insane things happen. And it's like, by the time we get to the end, it's like, of course he wanted to be Shogun, but he still had to do some stuff. He still had to work in his own way to do it. And admittedly, some things were kind of harsh. Some things were not so harsh. Some of the harsher things being in specifically like in the last episode, when he was looking for the spy, they were like chopping people's heads off. Like he was the one that burnt his ship. And of course, and I can't remember the guy who always betrayed him. I want to say it's I know it starts with a Y, but I can never remember his name. But it was like, his village. So it was like, oh, we got to find the spy that's in this village. They were like heads being decapitated. Like they show a scene where it's like they're putting heads on posts, and it's like, well, you burnt down the ship, but you're letting innocent people be like, hey, you seem suspicious. Boom, off with that person's head. Like there were a couple of heads there, and it's like you knew all these people were the spy because your spy's been there from episode 1, which was also a great sequence where it was like, oh, it turns out that he was the spy in the city the entire time. That was actually really cool. So I definitely enjoyed that. And they showed that like, I think maybe an episode before that as well, but him also speaking like fluent English and stuff, where it's like he pretended to only know a couple phrases here and there, and he was just the fisherman who was the spy. And it was like, oh no, he's just a full-on samurai and he speaks fluent English and everything. He's full-on super spy mode. I was like, oh, that's interesting. But they cut off a couple heads here and there, and when it was find them a spy, he was gonna have to kill somebody, and it just so happened to work out that kind of the combining, or really the clashing of cultures, led to him just having a body where it's like, oh, he died a day ago. That's crazy. So wild stuff like that. And it was like, oh man, he definitely did some dark things, and he had to make some sacrifice plays. Like his best friend, like the person who was there since he was a child, kind of helping him throughout battles and helping him lead throughout his entire life. They have this whole moment, and I'm like, even as they were playing it, because I was like, okay, it was in the very beginning, I was like, he's definitely faking it. It was like, obviously he is sad that his son died, which was also a crazy sequence where, his son killed some people, and it was just like, oh, I thought it was going to be a conversation where he was going to threaten them and stuff, and it was going to be like, hey, you're not going to do this, and he was going to pull his sword out and challenge him to a duel. And I'm not going to lie, when I thought that was going to happen, I was like, oh, he's going to get killed here. Like he's going to challenge him to a duel, and it's like, if I beat you, your men are going to leave. And I was like, oh, this kid's toast. Like that's what's about to happen. And then it was like, nah, he just said fire. And I was like, oh, and then they just got ripped to shreds. And I was like, well, I didn't see that one coming. I thought he was smarter than I thought. I'll give him that, because his whole thing was like, hey, I want to fight, I want to be in a battle and this and that. So I was like, oh, he's going for a battle. He's done for. He's not good enough. Like, that was clear. And unfortunately, things just didn't work in his favor. And it was complete random happenstance, which is just the way it goes. He almost had him. He was about to kill his uncle, and he slipped on like the little piece of his uncle's robe on top of a wet rock, and he fell and he bashed his head in on another rock, and he just dies. And I was like, this is nuts. Like, this is absolutely insane. And then he died, and then kind of move on too. It was like, that was one of the things with Toranaga, where some stuff would happen, and the way the show would work, it would be like, okay, it's like the next day, so obviously he's already gone through the shock, and so they don't show that sequence, but they do go through some of the motions, because it was like, the guy that he was constantly going up against that was trying to like take over the council, when they mentioned like, oh, you know, his son has died, he has to grieve, the first thing that dude said was like, he's got more sons. And he kind of, I think Mariko was the one talking to him, and he kind of shut it down. I was like, he has more sons. And I was like, oh, that's kind of effed up. And then when he went to meet his new son, and they're like, you know, it's a shame that, you know, you lost your kid. I was like, thank goodness I got more boys. And he kind of just was like, he smiled about it and handed them off. And I was like, oh, that's, like, he kind of moved on. It's like, you know, obviously he had his moment where he did actually grieve him. But even in that moment, I was just like, dang, he just kind of smiled. I was like, good thing I got more kids. Like, specifically, good thing I have more sons. And I was just like, huh. Yeah, it was rough back in the day. It was like, you know, I mourn the loss of this boy, but also there's another boy. He's good. He's alive. I'll figure it out. It was just like, dang, that's a little left up. And of course, you know, the sacrifice plays and stuff, like his best friend doing the seppuku was probably my favorite scene, because I was like, that's when I had to question. I was like, okay, I thought he was obviously faking, where it was like, he's obviously sad, but now he has to push it. Like, you know, they showed it where when they had like the first meeting where he was coming in and he was coughing and stuff, and they showed it that he had like the little thing to rest his arm. And I was like, okay, so obviously he's playing it up and stuff. And then it kept going. And I was like, I don't know if he's playing it up anymore, because that's when it got to the point where it was going so far where I was like, I'm not 100% certain anymore, because it seemed obvious. It was like, you know, even his buddy was like, he's going to fight. Like, don't worry, like, we got this. He's going to fight for sure. And then I was in the same headspace as him. I was like, he's effing with him. He's playing around. Like, he has to look sick. Like, I can't do this. I lost my kid. I don't want anybody dying. And then it was like, they got to the actual meeting. And it's like, yeah, we're going to give up. And it's like, I'm sorry, what are you talking about? And it's like, sacrifice, like, hey, it's not happening. And then they have this whole conversation, and I half caught it, because I was like, I wasn't sure. But when he had that part where he specifically asked them, what's more important, your clan or your country? I was like, that was interesting. But the moment was so intense. It kind of like, once it happened, it was super quick. And I was like, it kind of like, it hit something in my brain. But I was still just like, I don't know. Is he actually sacrificing him, because he's gonna let him kill himself? And I was just like, this is nuts. And then of course they have Mariko talk to him, and then he reveals like he understood what had to be done. He had to make that sacrifice to really sell it that I'm defeated. Like, I'm defeated to the point that I would let the closest person that I know kill himself in front of me, and also let his son chop his head off. That was wild. That was crazy. But all of it was good. And then he sends Mariko in, and then she has to, you know, it's like, oh, you know, we can't get out. And, you know, you say we're free, yet, you know, you killed off all my soldiers, which I honestly thought they were going to kill all those people and actually leave out. And that's how that would happen. I was actually surprised that they went through that point, and they actually, look, because they killed a couple people off. They had like the first dude, and it was like, hey, kill this guy. And he was like, and he bowed to them. And that was like the most like anime moment that they had, where he just went boom, boom. And then it was done. I was like, oh, that was like full anime moment, where it was like masterclass. He just hit him twice and it was done. Like, the guy tried to pull his sword, he cut through his hand, hit him in the neck, and hit the other guy. And was like, all right, we're done. And then there was, you know, it was a full-on battle after that. But then they die, and of course Mariko has to take up her weapon, which I thought was a great thing, because that's something that isn't really, you know, typically when it's samurai stuff, it's like, you know, it's samurai. They don't really talk about like the ladies and the wives of the house. So that was actually super cool that they put that in there, and they showed the training of her using the naginata quite a few times in flashbacks and stuff like that. I think even some of the scenes were in modern day where she was actually practicing, and I was like, oh, that's super cool that she does that. I'm so stupid. I was like, oh, that's cool. They're just showing that because that's an actual thing that happened, where it was like the ladies of the house would actually do that if they needed to defend themselves, and they specifically used that weapon. I was like, oh, that's super cool. And then she fought, and I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense. I'm just stupid. I thought they were just showing it as a part of like just the overall culture. I was like, oh, that makes, obviously they would do that for a sequence, you know, down the line. So that was a great scene. And then of course she's like, well, you know, I lost, but I can't stand this dishonor, so I have to kill myself. And man, they pushed it once again right up to the edge. And it was like, and you know, the dude, once again, I can't remember names, but the guy who was supposed to be like the Christian Lord, he was like, okay, I'll do that. I'll second you. And then he just didn't show up. I was like, bitch, like, I hate that guy. I hate that guy. So it's like, dang, it's like she has to kill herself and you just let her go. That's messed up. But of course, Blackthorn jumps in. He's like, hey, I will do it, as much as obviously he hates it. So it's like, I'll do it. And then it's like, oh, thank goodness. Right up to the line, dude comes in, here's your effing permits. Then of course everyone wants to leave. And then he's like, hey, what if we send ninjas in? They had like their one little ninja moment. And the trader guy, he kills the guy. He effed that dude up too. He was like, huh? And then he just stabbed him in the back. I was like, oh, that was pretty brutal. Like, I wasn't expecting that. Then the ninjas come in, they're going past everybody. It's like, all right, these are the couple of people we need to kill. And it wasn't supposed to be Mariko. Like, no one was supposed to really die. That's why he was like, hey, let's go to the gate. And she was like, well, I'm not going to be captured. And that's when the whole plan went south, because he was like, oh, well, if we go this way, obviously she'll be captured. It'll keep her alive. Everything will be cool. And then it was like, nope, they're going to blow this door open. And then she recites what she did during her initial seppuku. And it was like, oh, yeah, it's happening. And it was just like, and they do it. And then that's the catalyst, for the finale, where it's like she dies and he gets busted because he says, "Allah, forgive me." And it's like, hate this guy officially now. And then that, that was pretty much it. And, they have her, and then once again, horrible names. I remember like the main three people, but her friend who was basically controlling the guy in the council. I love the fact that they had the flashback where it turned out that they were friends, and then things obviously took a bit of a shift during a certain point in life. And I just love the way all of that stuff was handled, the way they did all the flashbacks with the characters. Mariko, for sure, them going through the motions and being like, all right, this is what happened in her past. This is why her, her family name was dishonored. Her and Buntaro, who's like the only other character I can remember. And just the way they handled that stuff with his character, I knew he wasn't dead too. Like episode 3 was like, if it's classic television, he went down an alleyway, he'll be back later. I thought he was going to be a traitor. That I was honestly shocked. That was the thing I expected. I was like, he's going to come back later and he's going to be someone that actually betrayed them. Turns out that was not the case. He's a crappy husband, sure, an abuser, so he was already kind of crappy in that own right, we found out. But I thought for sure, I was like, I know he's not dead. He's definitely going to come back and he's going to betray them. And then it was like, oh, that didn't end up happening. Like in any regard, he was actually with them 100%. And I was genuinely shocked by that, because I thought for sure he survived somehow and he was going to betray them later on. So I was honestly shocked by that, but just the wild tension between those characters, and then him wanting to allow, we'll say, Mariko to kill herself. And so it's like, hey, what if we do it together and then we can go into the afterlife as husband and wife? And she was like, I'd rather live, I think 1,000 years or 1,000 lives, something like that. Either way, the ultimate insult. I was like, I just wanted to be away from you. Not like, I remember in the beginning we had good times. I don't. It's fuzzy. It's fuzzy. So she never liked that guy. But it was interesting, and it's so interesting, like that specific scene for sure, especially because he does like the whole ceremony to make her tea and everything. It was like the one moment where it was like, it would have been interesting to see when he really shifted to be even worse. Because I feel like in the beginning, for him to be like, oh, we were happy and stuff, I feel like that was before he realized that there was no way he could get through that barrier because of, the issue she had with basically being given away, because she didn't know that it was the plan to keep her safe. So she had that hatred. And honestly, I thought that was going to shift things when she found out from Torinaga. That was another thing I was wrong about, because I was like, oh, that's kind of what led to her, kind of hitting Buntaro, and him being like, it started off where he thought it was okay, and then it got worse for him because she never let him in. And so then that made him a shitty person, which, you don't have to go to that point, but that's his excuse for it. But I thought that would shift things further. I didn't think it would really like save their relationship or anything, but it stayed exactly the same, because I thought once she found out the truth, it would be like, oh, that was why I was so shut off all the time. And then he got crappy because I shut him off. I wasn't crappy to him, but I was closed off because of a crappy scenario. Plus her whole family died. Like all of that story should have been like a little bit there, where it's just like, it was rough. She got so, basically given away from her family, and then they all betrayed everybody. Then they all died, and she's like the only person left basically. There should have been something in there where Buntaro was like, that's a little rough. Let's try to figure it out. I know she doesn't let me in, but I'm gonna work towards it. But he kind of just got tired of it and was like, I try to work towards it, and she doesn't do it. And so then he just started beating her. And it's like, oh, well, you screwed that up. And that's how it happened. And it just got worse and worse. And of course, the scene when he was drunk and then he shoots the arrows was like, okay, that's an interesting sequence for sure. Of course, blames it on being drunk. It was like, hey, my bad. It was the sake. I was like, okay. So that was an interesting moment where, you know, they have the tea ceremony and she basically tells him like, this is really what it is. I just don't effing like you, man. That's just how it's gonna be. It was fuzzy back in the day. I know I don't like you now though, for sure. So interesting how they ended up turning out, and you know, all things were simple. And unfortunately, she ends up dying and, you know, sacrificing herself. But that does lead things down the path of, you know, the least violence, oddly enough, as far as, you know, there no longer being a war. We get, you know, the flash forward during our final sequence where Toranaga is the dude's second. It's something like Nagashiba, it's something like that. Something like that, I can't remember. But he's like, you know, hey, I'm about to die, explaining like, are you actually evil? Are you actually good? And of course he wants to be Shogun, and he still has to do it in a certain way to where there's no bloodshed. Like it's half and half, because like obviously he does want to be Shogun, and he played it up as if he never wanted that. He wants to be kind and gentle and all these other things, and, you know, stop peace. But of course, you know, it's not like he was 100% against it, but some of the things he did, of course, specifically the stuff in the village was like, hey, we got to find out who this spy is. So they're killing off random people, and then it's like, hey, find a spy. You know, he tells his spy to do that. So it's like he obviously did some darker things, and he had his plays where it was like, hey, even if I do want to be Shogun, I do still have to make it where our country lives. Like he did have a point, even if it was like, hey, I want to be Shogun. There are no two sides about it. He had to do it the way he did it. Otherwise, it would have been such absolute chaos. Not only would he have died, but he knows, like, it's very clear that the guy who was trying to lead the council was going to do like the worst job. Like it's clear. And they even have that when the one girl it wasn't her mom. It was the first wife of the former lord. Even she was just like, dude, I'm dying. Let the hostages go. And that dude's a bum. Like she was dying and said, he ain't nothing. He ain't gonna be nothing. Leave him. I was like, that's interesting. So the way they handled it was like, clearly he's not the right choice. So the way they did it, where it was like, he did some darker things, but he still had to be the one to do it. And it was just an interesting way to kind of handle that in general. It's like, you know, it's complexity of war and just those times. That's just how it is. So I love the way it was handled all the way through. Like I said, the action was good. The acting was phenomenal. Of course, people were going to be talking about this for quite some time. I absolutely loved it. I don't know. I would love to watch it again. I am curious what they're going to do with the dub, or what they did end up doing with the dub. So I probably will watch it a second time at some point. It might not be like right now, but I'm definitely going to watch the dub just to see how it sounds and everything, how I feel about it, you know, because I actually had a great time watching it. And I was like, man, it felt super crazy, because watching it on Hulu, and once I realized, because I watch so much anime, I was reading it, and then I think like halfway through the first episode, I was like, I've been reading a lot. Like they're talking in Japanese and I'm reading subtitles like crazy. And it dawned on me, like, this is on like television for like, you know, the 2% of people that have cable still. But like this is just on TV. It's on FX in Japanese. And I was like, that's super cool. That's not something that we do, unless it was on FX and it was the dub version. So technically I don't know 100%, but I know on Hulu, when I clicked on it, the first thing it did was play it, you know, like with, you know, mostly Japanese. So I assume that that's how it aired on FX. And I was like, man, that's crazy. And another reason FX is just that channel, because I'm like, not a lot of people can get away with just like full subtitles. Like, it's not like you went to the movies. It's TV. It's cable TV, but it's still on television. And it was like, man, you know, that's a nudge. Like that's a leap that we don't really get a lot in television, where it's just in the native language. At least most of the time. They obviously did, you know, with the Portuguese, that was how they kind of introduced the English. But I was like, oh, that's a cool way to do that. But absolutely loved it. You know, like I said, I watch anime, so for me it was, like I said, it literally took like halfway through the first episode to be like, this was on TV in Japanese. Like most of this episode I'm just reading like, this was on TV. That's super cool to me. So absolutely loved it all the way through. We'd love to know your thoughts on all things Shogun, the good, the bad. If you watched the original series, if you read the book, of course, I know there's some things that I know that like the ending point where it was like, you know, did you always want to be Shogun? I think there's like a moment in the book where he full on says, like, he explains everything, like, yeah, of course I did. And it's like, it may get a little bit darker, but you know, kind of the same premise, just less words as far as the show is concerned. But I know there's obviously some extra things, you know, some little stuff here and there. It's a book condensed into anything. There are always going to be some changes. Something's going to be left out in some way, shape, or form. But I would love to know your thoughts on it, whether you've read the book or seen the old show or not, what you guys think about this show in general. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. Is there anything else that you can think of that is really like Shogun, as far as especially if if you're into samurai stuff that's not not documentary wise, like just a story based thing. I would love to know that. I would love some suggestions. I would, even if it's a movie. I mean, just some good movies. Max, by the way, if you're into like any old samurai movies, like Seven Samurai, all that stuff, it's on Max. Just to let people know, all that stuff is on Max. I don't know if the original Shogun is on Hulu. By the way, I didn't even think to look that up if they got the rights to have the original version too, which would be super smart on their part, because I bet a lot of people would watch the original just to compare it. Which I might actually check out just to see if they have that, because I would actually do it if it was just sitting on Hulu. But if you guys have any stories that are just like really great Japanese stories, especially samurai style stories, definitely let me know. Put them down in the comments, let other people know so they can find them. But like I said, if you have Max, all the classic movies like the Lone Wolf and Cub series, all of those movies are on Max. Everything by Akira Kurosawa, like all the old classic samurai movies, they're all on Max. So definitely check them out for sure. I know I have like a million on my list where I'm like, I just haven't taken the time to just go through them. I just found out that the Lone Wolf and Cub series is on there, so I just added like 5 or 7, I think it's like 7 movies, which I had no idea was that many movies. So I was like, oh, there's a bunch of these and they're all on Max. So one day, I'm like, once a week, I'm gonna probably start shooting through those. But thanks for checking this out. Like I said, we'd love to know your thoughts on all things Shogun, so please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.